It is a good day for baseball, simply because Shohei Ohtani is scheduled to pitch for tonight for the Los Angeles Angels. I require nothing else to be happy from a baseball fan perspective. But it also means we get to use Shohei Ohtani for DFS tonight, and that's always a delight too, because it means we know we have one rock-solid option no matter what. The question is, can we pivot? Can we find someone else who can hang with Ohtani, who can duplicate his production without, can we be different without being dumb? And I think that's a tough question for tonight because I kind of think we just want to ride with Shohei Ohtani, which, it's always more fun to root for Ohtani than against him. We'll dive on in, break down Ohtani's situation, break down some alternatives, and let you know how I'm viewing things for DFS for tonight. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and NumberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire.com, here to break down Thursday's 8-game main slate with locks set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. One sad weather note here is that there is a high chance of rain at Coors Field for the Dodgers and the Rockies. I'm not sure they'll be able to play through it, but Coors is very patient with these things. It's going to require checking back on it later on because I think it's a legitimate question mark if they'll be able to get that game in. So we'll talk about that game later, but just know that if you want to use Dodgers or Rockies, check back on the weather for Coors later on tonight. We'll get into that. We'll talk about Ohtani, talk about alternatives, and much more in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, we, of course, are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it, you can find us there. And while you're there, like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Also, FanDuel's World Fantasy Baseball Championship for 2022 is coming out this September, and there are still chances to get yourself qualified. This year's live final is in Chicago in September. The live final features $2 million in total prizes, with $500,000 going to first place. To get yourself entered into a qualifier, go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. FanDuel always does a great job with those. I've been able to go to four baseball ones and a bunch overall. They're always a delight. You have a blast. You get to meet a lot of really cool people, a lot of other smart DFS players. You get to hang out on FanDuel's dime. What could be better than that? So would recommend if you have not given it a shot. If you are there, swing by and say hi, because I think I'll be there to MC once again. Pitching preview for this Thursday main slate. Shohei Ohtani, shocker, is the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel, checking in at $10,100. Zach Wheeler is 10-7. Tristan McKenzie facing the beat-up Red Sox at 10-1. Logan Gilbert facing the Astros at 99. Jameson Taillon, 93. Jose Urquidy is 91, with Tyler Anderson, Brady Singer, Alex Wood, and Justin Steele, the others, at $8,000 or higher. When we were talking yesterday, we talked about why I was in on Max Scherzer, and that was because of how far he was above the field in terms of talent. Didn't care about the matchup. I just wanted raw talent on there, and that's what Scherzer got me. You want to take everything we talked about with Scherzer and apply that to Shohei Ohtani, but put it in a much better matchup, and I think that he is the no-thought top option for tonight. Ohtani's facing the Rangers. They have a 100 WRC plus against righties. They've got about a league average strikeout rate and not a big walk rate. So put it all together, it is a plus spot. And as you know, Ohtani is otherworldly right now. He's hit double-digit strikeouts in 5 straight starts. And we have seen some shifts in that time. That's part of why it was keyed off this stretch, because Ohtani's throwing fewer four-seamers now than he was earlier on this year. That's something he's been doing for his past 9 starts. And in that 9-start sample, his skill interactive ERA is 2.33. He has a 37% strikeout rate. He leads the slate in that strikeout department by almost 10 percentage points. We did see Ohtani struggle last week, let up 6 earned runs in that game, but his overall batted ball numbers in this sample are not that bad. He's about league average in this time, so that works. When you combine that with his sicko strikeout numbers, he's a psycho. We still do have Ohtani at a 2.78 ERA in this time, even with the bad game, quote unquote, bad game last week. So if you take the entirety of Major League Baseball, there are not many guys I would use over Shohei Ohtani right now. And none of those guys are on this slate. So I see you lock him in and go from there. And I think you can stack Coors Field while using Ohtani for tonight based on the way the salaries came through. So it is a worthwhile trade-off here. Shohei Ohtani needs to be your number one guy, and I don't think there is a viable enough option to justify pivoting for tonight. So that's my thought process there. It's Ohtani, massive, massive gap, everybody else, which means if I'm not using Ohtani, I want to dip down in salary because it gives me a much different lineup from the Ohtani teams and gives me more flexibility elsewhere. That's what I want. That's why I want to be on an Alex Wood for tonight. He is facing the Cubs, which is not a great matchup. Their WRC plus versus lefties is 122. So getting Seiya Suzuki there has helped quite a bit. The floor is not good for Wood as a result, but for cash games, I'm going Ohtani. Need to find some sort of upside, and Wood can suppress power. He's been throwing fewer four-seamers and more sliders in his past 12 starts. He's let up just a 31% fly ball rate in that time, which is a pretty good number. He's getting some strikeouts too. Strikeout rate is 25% in that time. The Cubs will strike out. That's kind of their one flaw versus lefties, a 24% mark there. So it's a volatile spot. Not the best floor, but a decent ceiling. Cubs can hit for some power, but they will strike out, and Wood can get those himself, which gives us at least a path to a good game for Alex Wood here. So I'd much rather use Ohtani. I will have a lot of Ohtani for tonight. He'll be my one by a mile, but Wood does help me get upside elsewhere. I can pair Mookie Betts with Freddie Freeman, Trey Turner, and I probably can't do that with Ohtani. So there's enough for me to put Wood second for tonight behind just Ohtani. Now, Wood is a value play. Salary is 84, which means the entire board is open for our third pitcher here. We could go with another high salary guy, low salary guy, whatever it may be. But I still want to make sure there's a gap between this guy's salary and Ohtani's. And that makes me interested in Cutter Crawford at $7,100. Crawford's facing the Guardians, which is a rough matchup because they don't strike out that much. I'm not into that part of it at all. But Crawford has been pitching really well in his most recent stint in the big leagues. He's got 4 outings, one of which was following an opener. But they've all been longer outings, but one was not a start. In those 4 outings, he has a 3.14 skill interactive ERA with a 28% strikeout rate, and he's letting up just a 32% hard hit rate across that span. Those are good numbers. Those are very good numbers. They're made more impressive by the teams he's faced because he did face the Rays twice. They're kind of mid, but then you've got the Yankees in there and the Blue Jays. The Rays do help juice up the strikeout numbers for Crawford, and that number, that 28% mark, will likely come down. I think projection systems have around 23%. I think that's probably pretty accurate. But keeping hard contact in check against that slate of teams, pretty dang tough and pretty impressive to see Crawford do it. I'm not sure how much of this he'll be able to maintain because it is a small sample. He did let up seemingly a lot of hard contact in a small sample in the minors. So there is risk here, but there is a bit of upside, and he saves you a ton of salary. So I do like Zach Wheeler. I think he's fine. Obviously, Tristan McKenzie's matchup is pretty good. Same thing for Jameson Taillon, especially with the Benintendi trade. So that weakens his opponent. Brady Singer's kind of interesting, but I'm just going to take the savings and dip down here to Crawford at 71 and just load up at hitter to give myself a different outlook than the Ohtani teams. So again, I want Ohtani. I'm going to use Ohtani a lot. Might just use exclusively him. But I think that if I'm not going there, I want to save salary, whether it be via Wood or Crawford. I think that's the way I want to play things for tonight. Part of this discussion with Ohtani is revolving around Coors Field, because I do want to stack the Dodgers, assuming that the rain lets us do so. But when I opened the salary pool this morning, I don't think the Dodgers got a Coors bump. Like, they're kind of the same salary as they always are. So as long as they're good to go, I think you can stack the Dodgers with Ohtani pretty easily, and I'm very into that. So let's talk about the Dodgers here in case this game does play. They're facing Jose Urena. Urena has made 4 starts with the Rockies. He has just a 14% strikeout rate with a 10% walk rate. He's letting up a ball in play about 75% of the time, which is a rough number for Coors Field. The batted ball data for Urena is not bad, but it's also not great. And it's especially not great when you adjust for the matchup and adjust for the park he's facing for today. We saw the Brewers get to Urena over the weekend, and that game was in Milwaukee, not at Coors Field. Urena let up 5 earned runs there. Now he's facing the Dodgers at home. The Dodgers active roster has a 124 WRC plus against righties, which is the best mark on the slate. They have a 42% fly ball rate and a 190 ISO. The only downside with the Dodgers tonight is that their salaries could mesh poorly with Ohtani because it's at Coors Field. But again, that didn't happen. So you're probably not going to get Betts, Turner, Freeman all in there with Ohtani, but Max Muncy is $2,400. Will Smith is $29. Jake Lamb is $22, which is pretty wild for Coors. I think they just got missed, honestly. So you might not get all three of the studs, but you can probably get two, maybe at least one for sure with Ohtani. I'd like to do that. So the Dodgers, pretty easy to get to. Again, check back on the weather for that game, but assuming they're good to go, we are good to go. We can also help maybe get to Betts, Freeman, Turner more easily by using a lower salary team for our second stack. And I actually think the Phillies could be the team that could get us there. And I'm not sure we've talked about the Phillies for stacking on this podcast since the Bryce Harper injury. And that's for a good reason, because they kind of suck without him. But I like their matchup tonight. They're facing the Pirates, Zach Thompson. They're like 15 Zach Thompsons in the majors. So the Pirates, Zach Thompson, which is a pretty decent spot. For the full season, Thompson has a 4.64 ERA. His expected ERA is 5.29. And he's been making some changes. He's throwing fewer changeups with more curveballs across his past 8 starts. His ERA in the time is better. It is under 4. So that's good. But that's despite a 5.09 skill interactive ERA with a 14% strikeout rate and a 44% hard hit rate. So the results have been good for Zach Thompson in this time with this new philosophy. But the peripherals say he's probably still the guy that he was before. I think the ERA is misrepresenting the way he's been pitching here recently. We saw him let up 7 earned runs last time out, and I think we could see more starts like that going forward. I think the Phillies could potentially be a team that could do that here despite their, badness. I don't know the right word for it, despite the fact they're not that great. So I'm more than willing to stack them here and feel good about the Phillies. And there are a lot of guys who could help us here. Derek Hall is $2,800. His ISO down around 290 now versus righties, but still very good. He had some sicko numbers in AAA2. Rhys Hoskins is at $2,700 despite having a 204 ISO versus righties. Bryson Stott hasn't turned it on yet in the majors, but does put the ball in the air. He's got some speed. Nick Castellanos is not a guy I'm super itchy to use personally. I would rather skip around him within my stacks. Kind of seems like he's in his own head right now, snapping at reporters, stuff like that. So maybe we'll gloss over him. But Hall, Hoskins, Stott, et cetera, in addition to Schwarber, obviously, I think you can make that work and feel pretty good about it. So the Philly is a good way to say some salaried hitter and feel good about that as well. Now, let's say the Dodgers get rain, or let's say you don't want to use the Dodgers because you think they'll be too popular. I think you should probably try to stack the Jays, and the Phillies can make that easier because of their low salaries. We'll talk about some more ways to save salary and things to watch as well. But the Blue Jays, straight up, the number 2 stack for tonight. They're facing Tyler Alexander, who's moving back in the rotation here for the Tigers. We saw him in the rotation earlier on. He struggled as a starter. He lasted just 4 starts and then missed some time, came back in the bullpen. And while he was in the bullpen, he did, start throwing his slider more, which could mean he's picked up something that will help him in his second stint as a starter, but I'm skeptical. Typically, sliders lead to more strikeouts, but that's not happening here for Alexander because in 8 relief outings with more sliders, his strikeout rate is under 10%. He's not getting elite batted ball numbers either. So the results have been good. He's let up just 2 earned runs across 16 2/3 innings, but he's gotten to face a lot of lefties. And he won't get that for tonight because the Jays are probably going to send out 9 righties. That's just kind of what they can do. And righties have a 46% fly ball rate versus Alexander this year. So it's a very good spot for the Jays. I will absolutely be stacking them here. And honestly, you could use Jake Lamb, Max Muncy, Will Smith, your Coors guys to get leverage to stack the Jays with the Dodgers. That might work too. So I'm just kind of shocked how low salary the Dodgers are. You could potentially stack the Jays with the Dodgers and Ohtani, which sounds really, really fun. I want to try to do that for tonight. There aren't many guys I don't like within this Jays stack. Their studs are obviously great, but their secondary guys in this team are stupid too. Like Matt Chapman's ISO is 227 against lefties. Danny Jansen, the spectacle beast, is 304. Teoscar Hernandez, not sure if he counts as a secondary option, but he's a 302. Santiago Espinal is at 190. So I don't think it matters which guys you use. Just pepper the mid-range here, and that'll make it easy to get to them with Ohtani and maybe even with that full Coors stack too, maybe with Mookie Betts. Sounds pretty fun. So the Blue Jays are not low salaried at all, but I don't think they need to be for tonight's slate given the value we have elsewhere. So the Jays definitely a team I'd like to stack for tonight, and probably can do so with Coors Field too. So check back on the Coors Field weather. If we get clearance there, Dodgers are 1. I'm going to put the Blue Jays 2, Phillies 3, but Phillies being the primary way to save some salary outside of the lower salary Dodgers for tonight. Let's dig into things to watch. I would be okay with Zach Wheeler if you're just purely looking for a pivot off Ohtani. He's facing the Pirates. Their strikeout rate is up to 24% on their current active roster. Wheeler does go super deep into games. I've got him projected for 6.4 strikeouts tonight, which is not bad. So I think he is a solid pivot, but I like Ohtani enough where I don't really want to pivot. So he works, but probably not going to be doing so for myself for tonight. I'm okay with some one-offs on the Angels. They're facing Spencer Howard, who's really struggled since he came back up. So I'm okay using guys against him, but no Mike Trout, obviously. We can't use Ohtani as a hitter tonight because he's a pitcher, which limits the options. So you can go here, but just make sure they're guys actually capable of upside because options pretty slim on the Angels with Ohtani and Trout being taken out of the discussion for us for stacking. One other spot for some one-offs is the Tigers. They're facing Yusei Kikuchi, who's making his first start off the IL. And we've seen Kikuchi struggle with hard contact the entire year. And the Tigers, another team that have a lot of low salary guys. Javi Baez, $2,600. Robbie Grossman, $24. Eric Hoffs, $24. And all those guys can hit for power against lefties. So if I'm looking for one-offs tonight, I might prefer the Tigers over the Angels. Non-Coors, other teams we discussed in stacking perspective might go Tigers over Angels in terms of one-offs for tonight, just because they have more guys I would want to use. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls for this Thursday slate. The boring one, I said that Teoscar Hernandez doesn't count as a second tier option for the Jays. Let's reflect that here and make him the boring one. Teoscar Hernandez had a rough start to the year in terms of power, wasn't putting it out of the park very often, but he has been recently. So we'll go with Teoscar Hernandez as our boring home run call for today. The fun one, I do want to go Derek Hall. We missed the birthday narrative on Hall because he had his birthday on Monday. So we missed out on that. But hopefully it's like a birthday or birth week narrative for Derek Hall. Just turned 27. Really interesting path to the majors. 14th round pick back in 2016. Finally getting his first shot in the big leagues now. Tore it up in AAA. Has looked good so far in the majors too. So I think he's kind of fun, and I like his spot for tonight. So home run calls are Teoscar Hernandez and Derek Hall. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot, but some good stuff coming up tomorrow here on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. NASCAR and UFC both coming your way all in the same place. So search for the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We have that plus PGA each week and NFL just around the corner. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups. Enjoy watching Shohei Ohtani. Enjoy the delight that we all get to enjoy once every week. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down Friday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.